Hey guys, today I have a spicy topic for you. So, since the recent patch, some things got adjusted with the Barber Heart, and especially for Rogue, we now simply have more options to choose from for our builds. And since Poison Imbuement does work now with Barber, you could question yourself, what is the best imbuement skill for the Barber Rogue after the patch? And yeah, for this reason I made this video, and I will explain and also prove mathematically, as always, my point, or at least explain mathematically what I believe is the best imbuement skill. If you're not interested in all that mathematical deep dive, you can just skip to the end of the video to the results. But for all who are interested, let's start. Um, okay, so I have this whiteboard here, and you already can see I am only comparing two imbuments here. So the reason is I believe that shadow imbuement is really unnecessary with the Barber Heart. Um, and this is simply because what the Barber Heart does is exactly what Shadow Imbuement does, but in a much stronger way. So the reason we played with Shadow Imbuments was to get a lot of AoE damage, and the Barber does this job much better with higher damage and bigger explosions and so on. So yeah, basically the Barber is just Shadow Imbuement in a very cracked version. So that's why it's not worth it, in my opinion, to consider playing Shadow Imbuement with the Barber. So we have only two Imbuments left, Cold Imbuement and Poison Imbuement. So Cold Imbuement is the Imbuement skill that I played before the patch. So it was kind of the only imbuement left that works with the Barber, but now also Poison imbuement works. So yeah, now the question is, what is better, Poison or Cold? So before we go into a very deep dive, I want to explain how Poison imbuement actually works with the Barber. So as you know, um, maybe I can put this. So Poison Imbuement, what it does, it basically applies a percentage of your base damage, and I will explain later how this base damage is calculated exactly. So it applies a percentage of your base damage as poison damage over a period of time, so most likely 6 seconds. This is how Poison Imbuement works. So usually what it does, at least for me, so I counted the dots. So instead of 6 seconds, I counted the each poison tick, so each poison damage over time value. And for me, it was always 16. So after I apply, I cast Poison Imbuement, but I need to say with Twisting Blades. So if I cast Twisting Blades, so the initial attack and then the return attack of the blade, this was always 16 dots for me. Okay, so and now how does this work? Like, so this was without the Barber Heart, so only the Poison Imbuement itself. And now with the Barber Heart, how exactly does this work? So with the Barber Heart, it always needs to start with a crit. Okay, so if we crit, what then happens is that we get some sort of damage absorb. So after you crit, the enemies are kinda immune and they will absorb all of the damage, right? So this is how Barber works. And during this absorb phase, which is like in my case, it's 2.4 seconds. And during this absorbed phase, some of the poison dots will get also absorbed. And after it ends, we get an explosion. So the enemy explodes, or at least, we get an explosion, and maybe the enemy dies in explosion. And after the explosion, what happens then for the poison is we still get some more poison ticks. So in my case, it was always about 10 to 11 poison ticks, okay? So what we can say is that during this absorb phase, the heart absorbs exactly the poison amount of my Barber heart amount. So 2.4 seconds of the poison would get absorbed. So 6 poison dots will get absorbed and increase my explosion damage. So my explosion Barber heart damage will get, is increasing by this amount of poison dots here during the absorb phase, okay? And the 6 dots is exactly equivalent to, like I mentioned, 2.4 seconds of my 6 seconds poison damage. So this all makes sense. So yeah, I have here 2.4 seconds of my poison damage, kinda. Okay, so this is important to understand. Since we need to understand how poison immune exactly works, and I will show you later why this may be important for calculation. Okay, so now back to the deep dive. What you can see here is a very similar stats and numbers as in my exploit glyph video, where I explained when you should play with exploit glyph and when not. So this is kind of my endgame rogue character with my best in slot stats. So I have all of the important stats like crit chance, crit damage, vulnerable damage, and so on. And additive damage is just a summary of all my additive damage factors like close damage, all damage, elite damage, and so on. Okay, so these are my endgame stats. And then here I want to compare the damage from each imbuement skill. And as I explained in my exploit glyph video, there is a DPS formula. You can also do this with an online Diablo 4 online calculator. And if you apply the formula correctly, then all of these stats will give us some numbers. And these numbers you can see here. So just without my imbuement, this number here would be my true DPS. So my average DPS with if I would have 1000 weapon base damage, base damage, or DPS is actually wrong, base damage. Okay, so this would be my number. And now, what I did here, I did exactly the same, but I I modified the DPS formula for each imbuement skill. So for cold imbuement, it's actually very simple. So what cold imbuement does, I can show you here, is, well, cold imbuement skills deal 20% more damage to crowd control enemies, double this bonus against frozen enemies. So if we can freeze our enemies, cold imbuement will just deal 40% more damage. So this is why I have a 40% increase, and this is not the total damage, this is only the damage coming from cold imbuement. So 40% of this damage here. And at least for my rogue skill, I have a very nice way to freeze my enemies. So I have the frostbitten aspect on my gloves, and the frostbitten aspect says that chilled enemies hit by my grenade skills have a chance to get frozen for 2 seconds. And this chance is very high because it depends on the critical strike chance. So double the critical strike chance, in my case, is always about 80 to 100%. So I basically freeze all of the enemies every combat, and you can watch my gameplay videos where I show this. So for my case, cold imbuement would always be kind of active and would always deal 40% more damage. So that's why I can assume this. And also to mention, should I? Yeah, I can mention it here. So with this build, I can also show you some more skills that I'm using. So I am also playing, for example, with Enhanced Dash. So Enhanced Dash says my enemies take 15% more critical strike damage. And also I'm playing with Deadly Ambush, which also says that I deal 23% more critical strike chance to enemies affected by my trap skills. And I play with Poison Trap. So you can see here that my critical strike damage actually is much higher because I also play with all of these aspects or skills, and also here frostbitten aspects give me additional critical strike damage. So how this works is it increases your critical strike damage by even further amount. And so you can see instead of 230 damage percent critical strike, we have 403% in this case, okay? And this applies to both also here. So yeah. And this is important because poison imbue damage increases your total damage. And so it scales. It just scales with your damage. Basically very simple, but it's a big difference to poison imbuement, as you will see later. And so these numbers that I show you in this comparison makes more sense if you have also quite high crit damage, okay? So that's why I show you if you play with also many skills that improve your critical strike damage, then you will have similar numbers as me, because it always depends on your build and your stats, obviously. Okay, so this is Cold Imbuement. And also to mention, maybe I'm also playing with Tricks of the Trade. So this is also some legendary node from Paragon, which will increase my total damage, and vice versa, the cold imbuement damage. So you just, there are some modifiers you need to keep track of when doing such calculations. Okay, so now let's move to Poison Imbuement. And Poison Imbuement works completely different than Cold Imbuement, for example. Here you can already see with Cold Imbuement, I have less additive damage. And I need to explain this shortly. So Poison Imbuement seems to have a very unique and its own damage formula. And this is not proven or something, but so it's not official information. But there are some people that are working on the damage formula. And I will show you one example from one user who also watched some of my videos. And he posted this comment below my videos. And here he explains how he think the damage formula works for poison imbuement. And it's quite promising, actually, his results. And so the core information that I take from this is the things I just highlighted here in red. So within this formula, for example, instead of putting all additive damage in one damage bucket, so the additive damage bucket is very big, as you can see, but for poison imbuement, core skill damage and cutthroat or marksman skill damage are summed up together in its own damage bucket. So it's like you should add, like here, we would add another damage bucket, and this would be core skill plus cutthroat. And here, it's calculated by 1 plus percentage of core plus percentage of cutthroat or marksman. So that's why I need to adjust this number here. So I take core skill and cutthroat out of my additive damage bucket and need to put it into this new into this new damage bucket kinda, where it's 1 plus I have like 100% core skill, so it's 1 plus 1. And then I have like, I think 50 cutthroat, so 0.5. And so I would have another damage bucket here. And also another interesting part is he found out that damage percent, so all damage bonus, is actually doubled up within this additive damage bucket. So I have like 50% all damage, and this would be multiplied by 2. So instead of 50, I have 100% all damage. So yeah, this is just the explanation of how the formula works. At least for now, it seems like that it works like this. And so I needed to adjust the formula and all of the stuff. And here you get the number for poison damage. So after casting one cast of poison imbuement, this is the additional poison damage you will apply. But it's even better than that, because we also can play with blended poison imbuement. And blended poison imbuement, every time we critical strike, we will deal 75% more poison damage. So the big disadvantage of poison is that critical strike damage does not apply to the damage formula, so that's why we have 0% here, because it just doesn't apply to the formula. But if we critical strike, we will at least have 75% more poison damage. And if you also take this into consideration, then we get this number here. So here you just need to take into consideration how often this effect happens. So in my case, I have 50% critical strike chance. So 50% of the time I will deal this damage here, and 50% of the time I will deal 75% more damage. And this is kind of the average damage if I play with this passive skill. So you can see it increases even further to 95% of my kind of base damage, or this is like my average damage. So yeah, poison imbuement, you can see at least for now, increases my total damage by a larger margin or larger amount than cold imbuement. But now we need to think more in a more practical way, and that's why I need to explain you how poison imbuement works. So poison imbuement, as I mentioned, will only absorb the poison damage for the amount of your Barber heart. So if you're playing with a 2-second Barber heart, which I can recommend you, since 2-second Barber hearts are, in my opinion, always better than 4 seconds, just because you will proc the explosion quicker, and this explosion can proc some more explosions from small HP mobs, so you will have much faster potential escalations with these explosions. So that's why I always assume playing with 2 seconds Barber Heart. So only 2 seconds of the poison will get absorbed and provide damage to the explosion of the Barber. And so I think we kind of need to take this math also into the we need to consider this as well in our calculation. So we need to actually, so this is the damage for 6 seconds, so the full duration of poison. So for this Barber Heart interaction, we need to divide. I can also write this. So we need to divide this number by 6, because this is for 6 seconds. And then we need to multiply it by 2 seconds, okay? And then we get this number here. And now it's much lower. So this is the damage for yeah, the Barber Heart explosion. So all of this stuff here will provide this damage. So Poison Imbuement will provide this damage for our Barber Heart explosion. So if we compare this number with Cold Imbuement now, we can see Cold Imbuement is a bit of a winner here. So Cold Imbuement will deal more damage for the Barber explosion. So if you want to play, like, if your goal is to deal as much as damage as possible within your Barber Heart timing, so within 2 or 4 seconds, then Cold Imbuement will be a bit more efficient or effective. So in this case, because how you can also think about poison damage is if we trigger this explosion and everything dies anyway, because the damage from the explosion is just so high that everything dies, then the other 10 poison dots are kinda worthless and they are kinda deleted. So if anything dies, we just don't need them. So this is the basic idea. So for depending on your total damage and how quickly things die, if you just want to kill a pack of elites within 2 seconds, then Cold Imbuement might be a slightly better choice. If you can make enemies frozen all the time, so like I mentioned, the build is very crucial. But Poison Imbuement can be very good if you are also fighting like large bosses. So if you fight content or enemies that will not die instantly after the first Barber explosion, so yeah, like big high tier dungeon elite packs or bosses, then Poison Imbuement will deal more damage, since the poison ticks will just continue after the Barber Heart explosion. So yeah, very long explanation. I hope this was not too complicated. But yeah, I just wanted to give you the exact mathematical numbers and calculations for these two imbuements. And now you can make your own decision. So I gave you the insights, and for me, actually, I don't know which I want, which I will choose now. I used to play with Cold Imbuement all the time, and I really like it. So especially for this bursting damage, it's very nice. But since the HP of some bosses, or actually of all bosses, got increased or will get increased. For now, it seems to be buggy a little bit. So right now, the bosses seem to have the same HP as before the patch. But especially when the bosses will increase their life, it's you will have a point of playing Poison Imbuement just for the single target damage. But you just need to keep in mind for all of these trash mobs and large group of enemies, you just don't need poison because it's just an overkill. And also some players play without any imbuements at all, just because Barber is so powerful and potent that you don't need this additional damage. But yeah, so this is the deep dive. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned it and it wasn't too complicated. And I guess I see you in the next video. I will probably update my Barber build anyway. So I already updated it on my max roll, but yeah, maybe I will drop a video for that. So stay tuned. Until there, have a nice day, like my videos, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.